The central region of Russia is without power due to Ukrainian drone attacks. Also, the largest oil refineries have been hit again. An inadequate defender of the Russian world attacked people in Switzerland because of the Ukrainian language. North Korean troops have entered Sumy Oblast. Washington has issued a harsh ultimatum to the Kremlin. Tomahawks will fly to Putin's residence. Russia is losing control over the Far East. China has economically seized Russia's eastern regions. Kadyrov's end. The head of Chechnya has finally enraged Putin. Purges have already begun. This is horrific. Occupiers torture to death 16-year-old Ukrainian teenagers from Mariupol. Hello, my name is Katerina Nesterenko, and right now we'll cover the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other again on YouTube. It's restless in Russia again. This time something went wrong at an oil refinery in the Volgograd region and a power line in Saratov. The Crimean Wind Monitoring Group reports that local residents in Saratov reported a hit on a plant, while in the Volgograd region they complain about the disabling of the Balashevskaya power line.
What are you looking at, damn it? At the station, damn it! Yes, damn it! Hello? There it is, damn it! That's it, damn it! Turn it off, son of a bitch!
It is the Balashevskaya line that ensures the transit of electricity from the Volgeskaya HPP to Russia's central regions, as well as partially to the Volgograd and Saratov regions. For their part, the General Staff confirmed that Ukraine's defense forces, on the night of Thursday, October 16th, struck the Saratov oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region.
The Saratov oil refinery is one of the oldest oil processing enterprises in Russia. As of the year 2023, its total oil processing volume impressively reached 4.8 million tons annually. The enterprise is involved in meeting the needs of the Russian armed forces. The Ukrainian defense forces are consistently implementing a range of measures aimed at destroying critical elements of the Russian Federation's military-industrial base in order to deprive it of the ability to continue its aggression. To be continued, glory to Ukraine.
Well, what can I say? I definitely like such news. Like if you agree. A scandal on a train in Switzerland. An inadequate man attacked a Ukrainian family simply because he heard the Ukrainian language. The incident occurred on a train traveling the Interlaken-Spitz route.
What are you looking at? Apologizing? What are you going to do? Why are you just sitting there, damn it? Huh? I'm Swiss, damn it! Look, he's filming. Delete it! You better delete this video before this, damn it, ends badly for you. What kind of Swiss are you, damn it? Show me your Swiss passport. Why would I? I'm Swiss. Yeah, damn it. Who are you? You ask who I am? Me? What kind of Swiss are you? Well, what are you? Who are you? What are you? Don't you know? What are you? Don't you know? What kind of...
Social media reports that the woman, her husband, and their one-year-old child were returning home. They were speaking Ukrainian among themselves when an unknown man started shouting, threatening, and even provoked a fight. According to the victim, her husband, a Swiss citizen of Belarusian origin, understands Ukrainian well, so he immediately understood the reason for the aggression. The victim filmed the conflict. The footage shows the man threatening, manipulating, and behaving extremely aggressively.
Don't disgrace. Get out of this carriage so they don't see you. Understood?
Understood?
Or I'm telling you, you'll get such a censored when you leave 100%. What don't you believe? Why are you stuck? Get out of here! Get out with your family before your child gets a censored evening! Understood? Psychological.
Eventually, the conflict escalated into a physical altercation. The police were called to the scene. According to the woman, the attacker was intoxicated, tried to escape, and even demanded money for his silence.
The police haven't taken any action yet, and they're reluctant to respond at all. They told the man to wait until they have video from the train's cameras, after which they'll fine him for causing bodily harm to a Russian citizen. We'll be filing a further complaint with the prosecutor's office.
The most interesting thing is that after the publication of this video, other victims of the same man came forward.
Thanks to my video, many people were found who also suffered at the hands of this brute. These were mostly women with children, whom he threatened with violence, physical harm, and rape.
The injured woman said that this aggressive man's name is Alexander Babiks. He is from Latvia, does not speak German, and acts in tandem with a woman named Elena Chubata, a Ukrainian from Odessa who has refugee status in Switzerland. What do you think of this whole story? Right, don't hold back in the comments. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you watch us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We, Ukrainians, are very grateful for your support and proud to have adequate viewers. Also, write under this episode from which country you are watching us and whether you support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and we will continue for now. Next, the most interesting part. And now to news from the front. The General Staff reports that North Korean drone operators are adjusting the strikes of Russian invaders. The publication states that the command of the Russian occupation army is engaging units of North Korean troops to support operations in the Sumy region.
Operating from the territory of Kursk Oblast, these units conduct aerial reconnaissance missions using UAVs, identify positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, and assist in adjusting fire on Ukrainian positions in Sumy Oblast.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces have recorded negotiations between North Korean drone operators and Russian army personnel. North Korean UAV operators adjusted fire from multiple launch rocket systems on Ukrainian troop positions.
Due to critical manpower losses and the failure of the offensive operation in Sumy Oblast, Russian occupation forces continue to involve North Korean troops in active combat operations.
The General Staff also reported that the Ukrainian Defense Forces' defensive operation in the Pokrovsk direction continues, and they showed footage of what is happening near the city. Among those who bravely and professionally hold this section of the front are soldiers of the 138th Special Purpose Center of the Military Law Enforcement Service. The video shows episodes of their combat work. The General Staff says that the approaches to Pokrovsk are turning into another large cemetery for the Russian army. Thousands of occupiers are being destroyed on the outskirts of the city and in nearby settlements.
In Pokrovsk itself, the fight against enemy sabotage groups continues as they continue their attempts to gain a foothold in the city. In such conditions, the work of our unmanned aerial vehicle operators and counter-sabotage groups is especially important.
A serviceman with the call sign Machnoy talks about the situation on other sections of the front.
Alexandrovskoye direction, Dnipropetrovsk region. After losing Alexeyevka, the enemy began pressing further east. They are working in the ravine area, attempting to advance toward Orestopil and approach it from both the west and the south. Sosnovka is a key point. It's unclear whether their pressure there will hold. Without flanking support, a local assault has a chance of stalling, but if they bring up reinforcements, the risks increase. There's also a real possibility that, from the captured Alexeyevka, the enemy will shift forces west toward Novoalexandrivka, while simultaneously attempting to advance north to Vovche. Hulyai-Polye direction, Poltava bridgehead. Activity is high and concentrated in two areas, central Poltavka and east of Okhotniche. Enemy aircraft and artillery are constantly active, with synchronized attacks as shells arrive, highlighting their attempt to dislodge us with firepower. The enemy is also actively using small arms. The casualty ratio is approximately 1.5, but according to the infantry, we have many wounded, mostly from concussion.
Meanwhile, there will be even more losses in the Russian army as new Western weapons are heading to Ukraine. A lot of weapons, from Europe and from overseas. About this and other military news in our review.
Zaporizhia direction. Drones of the 422nd Separate Luftwaffe unmanned systems battalion destroy the mobile Terek radar. This is not an isolated incident. In this direction, Ukrainian drones are destroying a huge amount of aggressors' equipment. The Atesh Partisan Resistance writes that the Russian army has big problems with air defense systems there.
Our sources in the air defense units of the occupation forces in the Zaporizhia direction report on the catastrophic condition of the equipment. Sanctions, missile strikes by the Ukrainian Defense Forces on repair enterprises and manufacturing defects have led to the mass failure of anti-aircraft missile systems, including the Tor-SAM system. Due to a severe shortage of serviceable systems, the occupiers are forced to use tractors to tow launchers into position. This practice makes the equipment extremely vulnerable and turns expensive complexes into easy targets. Atesh.
The Russian army does not count losses as it tries to get closer to Zaporizhia to strike the city and the logistics hub. And to the city with a population of more than 500,000 people, it's only a few tens of kilometers.
The situation will worsen. We have already seen bomb strikes on the city. and Russia is trying to get closer to such a distance to strike with bombs and drones. Currently, the distance from Russian-controlled territory to Zaporizhzhia is approximately 35 kilometers, and every 5 kilometers will worsen the situation for the local population and for army logistics. Michael Kaufman, military analyst.
To hold back the enemy and inflict unacceptable losses on them, Ukraine now needs military assistance more than ever. This week, Finland will transfer a new package of military aid. Also, Lithuania, Estonia, and the Netherlands will provide money for the purchase of additional weapons for Ukraine. And this is far from a complete list. Everything is within the framework of the Pearl program. This is the purchase of American weapons with money from NATO partners. On October 15th, Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth arrived in Brussels and demanded more weapons for Ukraine. At the meeting of NATO defense ministers and the Ramstein Contact Group on arming Ukraine, he called on allies to allocate more funds for the purchase of American weapons. He emphasized that the Pearl initiative is aimed at bringing peace to this conflict.
You get peace when you are strong, not when you use strong words or threaten with your finger. You get it when you have strong and real capabilities that adversaries respect. I believe that's what NATO does. I believe that this Pearl initiative is precisely that. So we expect today that more countries will donate even more, that they will acquire even more to ensure Ukraine for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. As winter approaches, the Russians have returned to mechanized assault tactics, especially in the Donetsk direction. This video shows how drone operators of the 93rd Mechanized Brigade destroy armored vehicles of the occupiers. But due to worsening weather conditions in the Donetsk region, the use of attack drones is becoming more difficult. The Russians are trying to take advantage of this, for example, to capture Volodymyrivka and Sofiyivka. These are small villages in Donbas. During the offensive, they deployed 6 tanks, almost 40 armored combat vehicles, and 40 units of motor equipment. Russian troops tried to break through the defense lines, throwing equipment and infantry into the attack wave after wave. In the first echelon, mobile groups on motorcycles operated, followed by tanks and armored vehicles with airborne troops, according to the DSHV command. According to the Ukrainian analytical portal Deep State, the advance of the Russian army in Ukraine has slowed down by almost half since September. One of the most important factors in the failure of the Russian army's offensive operations is the supply of weapons from our Western partners. Therefore, for Ukraine, the initiative within the framework of the program for the purchase of American weapons by NATO Pearl countries is very important now. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian warriors. They hold the front and resist a huge horde that significantly outnumbers them. Therefore, I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you don't have the financial means to do so, write them words of support in the comments. I know they are watching us. Tomahawks even closer. The New York Times reports that the US Department of Defense has already developed a plan to transfer or sell long-range missiles to Ukraine. Along with this, the Financial Times reports that in the event of missile supplies to Ukraine, American specialists will operate them.
A high-ranking Western official told the media that this approach minimizes the risks of escalation and prevents the transfer of sensitive technologies. The training of Ukrainian military personnel will be limited, as Tomahawks require complex navigation and guidance systems, and their black boxes are controlled by the United States of America.
Well, considering how much the Russians are burning, this option is not bad.
The corresponding decision of the US administration, I repeat, if it is ultimately adopted, not only risks escalating confrontation, but will also inflict irreparable damage on Russian-American relations, which have only just, so to speak, begun to show elements of renewed bilateral dialogue.
There's another interesting detail in the Tomahawk story. Kyiv Post reports that by providing Ukraine with Tomahawks, Trump wants to pressure Germany to also transfer its long-range Taurus missiles to Kyiv. If this is true, then I can hardly imagine the level of howling from the swamps. Although it seems that this is exactly what the White House is trying to achieve. And now US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made a statement about an ultimatum for Russia.
If this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, the United States of America, together with its allies, will take the necessary steps to make Russia pay for the continuation of its aggression. If we absolutely have to take this significant step, the United States Department of War will be fully ready to do its crucial part in a truly unique and powerful way that only America can achieve.
But pressure from Washington is being exerted not only on the Kremlin, but also on one of its closest allies, China. The head of the U.S. Treasury said that Trump is ready to impose 500% tariffs against China if it continues to buy Russian oil. But here, as always, there are nuances.
85 US senators are ready to grant President Trump the authority to impose tariffs on China of up to 500% for buying Russian oil. We were informed that the European Parliament will not adopt a similar measure.
And now there's going to be a truly unexpected piece of news. The Telegraph reports that Trump plans to create a Ukraine Victory Fund, which will be financed by those very tariffs against China. It sounds like fantasy, but I think more news and clarity will come tomorrow after President Zelensky's meeting with Donald Trump. So we wait. And you, meanwhile, make your predictions on how the meeting at the White House will go. Indian oil refineries are preparing to reduce imports of Russian oil after U.S. President Donald Trump's statement about India's intentions to stop buying raw materials from Moscow. Reuters writes about this. Sources of the publication note that it will be difficult to immediately stop buying Russian oil, as a sudden switch to other types of raw materials will lead to a rise in world oil prices and threaten inflation. Reuters interlocutors added that Indian oil refiners have not yet received official notification from the government about the cessation of Russian oil imports.
On Wednesday, Trump said he discussed India's purchases of Russian oil with Prime Minister Narendra Modi as part of his efforts to increase pressure on Moscow to reach a peace deal with Ukraine. I wasn't entirely happy about India buying oil, and he, Modi, assured me today that they will absolutely not be buying any oil from Russia, Trump told reporters during a significant White House event. That's a big step. Now, we will get China to do exactly the same thing.
In turn, the Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that it is discussing deepening energy cooperation with Washington, but did not mention abandoning Russian energy carriers.
The current administration has demonstrated interest in deepening energy cooperation with India. Discussions are ongoing.
What do you think? How realistic is everything that Reuters writes about? Here's the news. Just listen. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz will propose at the upcoming European Union summit to use frozen Russian assets in the West to provide Ukraine with a loan of 140 billion euros. Reuters reports this. The publication writes that these funds should help Kyiv finance its defense needs and maintain economic stability. Additionally, Merz noted that the EU must act decisively to show Russia that support for Ukraine will remain unwavering. He first proposed an interest-free loan backed by Russian assets. This was back in late September.
We don't want to do this to prolong the war, but to end it.
According to Merz, Russia's dictator Putin must understand that Europe's support for Ukraine will not weaken, but rather grow stronger. The use of frozen Russian assets will send a powerful signal about the EU's determination to help Ukraine and at the same time make Moscow feel the economic consequences of its aggression. Let me remind you, on October 23rd, a meeting of the European Council will take place in Brussels, where they will consider using frozen assets of the Russian Federation to provide financial assistance to Ukraine for the coming years. Participants will hear from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, for now, we await good news from Brussels.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ramzan Kadyrov has fallen into complete disgrace with the Kremlin. He barely managed to wash off the bad reputation after the scandal surrounding the wild berries marketplace, when he got himself into a new conflict that, according to forecasts, could finally bury at least the political career of the Chechen little Tsar.
The Kremlin jackal Ramzan Kadyrov is once again losing ground. This time, even the media lapdogs have bared their teeth at him.
Is that normal? Done.
The Kremlin made it clear to Ramzan through the mouths of its propagandists where his place is after the scandal with Stat Duma deputy Shamanov, who in 1996 commanded a group of Russian troops in Chechnya. Now, in 2025, the general couldn't hold back at the parliamentary microphone and expressed outrage at the decision to rename settlements.
Cossack stanitsas, which historically possessed their own unique and distinctive names. Not only did you forcefully drive out the Russian-speaking population at the very start, now you're erasing the names as well. This is the history of our state. What are you doing? I'm asking you.
To this, the head of Chechnya, who has always flaunted his special status in the Kremlin, reminded Shamanov of the war crimes committed and sent the old man in uniform to the so-called special military operation. But instead of apologies, a torrent of propagandist filth was poured on Kadyrov.
I'm addressing you personally, Shamanov. If the word patriot isn't just an empty sound to you, gather your supporters and head to the front lines in the Special Military Operation Zone. Let's see what you're capable of. Your vast experience, which you gained by tormenting the civilian population, is something we know about firsthand. Kadyrov, apparently boasting about the participation of Chechens in the Special Military Operation Zone, is unilaterally sending Shamanov to the front. Shamanov? Excuse me, but what right does Kadyrov even have to speculate on the topic of the Special Military Operation? He's not the one who decides who gets sent to the combat zone, or who doesn't get sent. We have a commander-in-chief, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. We have military leadership, the general staff. Shamanov is a professional soldier who served his country for many years and was wounded in action. And it's important to note that his awards are earned with his sweat and his blood. That's a fact.
That's a historical fact.
And what about Kadyrov? We've all seen the photos, some video recordings. Kadyrov apparently has a whole gallery of these medals. But what are they really worth? He awarded them to himself. Let's compare Shamanov's biography to Kadyrov's biography.
It seems to me that many people think Kadyrov is starting to weaken now because that's pretty typical for Kadyrov. The exchange of pleasantries with General Shamanov ended with Kadyrov uttering his ritual words that such generals should be put on trial, and then nothing else happened. There wasn't even a hint of an apology. And on top of that, everyone knows that Kadyrov is not in the best physical shape, that he's preoccupied with his legacy, with succession in the Republic. Overall, this is a good moment for all those who genuinely hate him, both among nationalists and among the security forces. It's a chance to test Ramzan, to see if by the end of 2025, he still has any real ability to actively resist.
Ramzan tried to show in an unusual way that it's still too early to write him off. The Russian central bank has just put up options for the new design of the 500-ruble banknote for public voting. Kadyrov mobilized all his administrative resources in the region and started campaigning hard for the image of the Grozny city complex. This sparked an unprecedented interethnic squabble across the Russian internet. Not only the Z patriots and Putinists got involved, but even the so-called liberals.
It's not just anyone trying to impose their will on Russians, but Ramzan Kadyrov himself, a living, distorted mirror of Putinism. An unelected thug appointed by Putin who shows open contempt not only for Russian laws written on paper, but for any standards of decency at all, who threatens and intimidates. Who, while heading the poorest region in the country, lives no worse than a Saudi sheikh. He hands out palaces and Rolls Royces to his relatives at the expense of the budget. He gives his underage son, known only for beating a detainee in prison, government positions and awards. Kadyrov, with his style of rule, is completely out of step with both society and the times he lives in.
The scandal erupted with such force that the central bank hastily cancelled the vote for the banknote. But discontent is still simmering in Russian society. If before, people were even afraid to look in the direction of the clan, now they openly curse them at every turn. Even the Kadyrovites themselves are dissatisfied. For the first time in the past 30 years, the Kremlin did not support them.
In the Russian hinterland, a nationalist movement is growing. A Russian community that absolutely rejects anything except what is Russian. That is why, in the current reality of the Russian Federation, Ramzan Kadyrov, as an official with special status, with Chechnya, where everything is done differently, does not fit in at all. And further, if we talk about Ramzan Kadyrov as an official, his time is over, so to speak. I see that the goals and objectives set by the Kremlin for the Federal Center regarding the Chechen Republic have all been completed. That is, all goals and objectives have been achieved. It's no secret that the subjugation of the North Caucasus as a whole depends entirely on the subjugation of Chechnya. Today, Chechnya is subdued. Moreover, within the territory of the Chechen Republic, that is, within its borders, a 150,000-strong group of Russian troops is stationed. These are not just mere conscripts, these are military personnel who have been specifically tasked with fully and completely controlling this entire region. Therefore, it is clear that everything that Russia truly needed to accomplish before the actual start of the large-scale, full-blown war in Ukraine was successfully achieved with the direct and significant involvement of Ramzan Kadyrov, a key figure in these operations. As we remember, all the high-profile crimes and contract killings were committed either with the direct involvement of Ramzan Kadyrov or with the participation of people associated with him. This includes Boris Nemtsov, Anna Politkovskaya, and other journalists who were killed both within the territory of the Russian Federation and abroad. That is to say, this entire set of tasks that was assigned to Ramzan Kadyrov in this case has been fully completed. Everything has been finished. The project is complete, the contract is over, and now the question is what to do next with Ramzan Kadyrov.
It's ironic that now the very machine of propaganda and special services that spent years creating the image of Ramzan Kadyrov is now devouring him. It's quite possible that the little Tsar, visibly wasting away before our eyes, who lives in the illusions of his already lost influence, will end up facing trial. All those feats that were attributed to Don Don on Russian television screens could, in an instant, be turned into crimes against Russians.
The Kremlin is losing control over the Far East, while China and North Korea are dividing up Russia's periphery. Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service reports that China and North Korea are gradually taking over the eastern regions of the Russian Federation economically, while Russia itself is increasingly paying its wartime allies with its own territories.
According to forecasts, the volume of its investments in the region could reach 1 trillion rubles in 2025. However, most of the deals concern trade. There are no infrastructure projects. According to Viktor Kalashnikov, a senator from the Khabarovsk Krai, in 2024, the volume of Russian-Chinese trade turnover increased by 5.5 million tons. At the same time, China is carrying out a creeping demographic expansion. From Vladivostok to the Urals, up to 2 million Chinese people already live there. And this number is growing.
At the same time, intelligence reports that North Korea is now carrying out a labor expansion. Over the past year, more than 15,000 North Korean workers have arrived in the Far East, and unofficially, the number is up to 50,000. Russian companies have already ordered another 153,000 labor contracts. The workers receive minimal pay, while Pyongyang earns up to 500 million annually.
This creates a situation where two nuclear states are simultaneously strengthening their positions on the territory of a third. China is creating economic dependence, while North Korea is creating a labor dependence. Both countries are solving their problems at the expense of Russian resources. In the long term, the growth of Chinese presence and the expansion of North Korean labor quotas could create a conflict of interest between the partners. The Kremlin risks losing control over 40% of its own territory, almost 7 million square kilometers with a population of 79 million people, turning the Far East into an arena for foreign strategies.
What do you think about this news? Write your thoughts in the comments. By the end of 2025, Russia may become dependent on fuel imports by up to 60%. And repairs to refineries damaged by drones could stretch into mid-2026. The fuel crisis in Russia has affected more than 57 regions due to Ukrainian drone attacks on refineries. Fuel sales are being restricted and there are lines at gas stations.
The fuel crisis in Russia has even reached oil-rich Tyumen.
Tyumen, have you seen this? I pull up to a gas station today, hand over 3,000 rubles and say, please fill up my tank for 3,000 rubles, 95 octane gasoline. And they tell me, nope, you can only get 30 liters.
Gasoline is running out in more than half of Russia's regions.
The daily madness at Rosneft gas stations continues. There's no gas anywhere except at Rosneft. Now you just have to stand in line for a bit like this.
But as always, the authorities say the situation is under control. There's only a slight price increase.
We understand the situation. Prices have gone up. The most important thing is that there is gasoline at the gas stations.
Well, you could say that. Maybe there is somewhere, but people are saying otherwise.
Guys, there's practically no gasoline at any gas station. I'm checking myself. What we're seeing here is all a line for a gas station where there's still a chance there might be gasoline left. Most likely they have it, either premium or 95 octane. And I started filming somewhere in the middle of this sausage line to show you what's going on. This kind of collapse. There's no gasoline at the gas stations. Give us some gas, guys.
Russia will become dependent on fuel imports.
So in this country, there might not even be gasoline at the gas stations.
Oil companies will not be able to resume oil refining at previous volumes until...
Looking ahead to the future, we anticipate the arrival of June in the year 2026. This specific month and year hold particular importance for various reasons, marking a significant point in time. We are preparing for the events and developments that are expected to unfold during this period, as June 2026 approaches on the calendar. This is necessary not only for the normal functioning of the oil refining sector of the economy, but for the entire economy as a whole.
Russian refineries remain technologically backward and outdated in terms of production structure. When some plants stopped operating, the country effectively lost a significant portion of its domestic capacity.
Replacing certain key components with less advanced or inferior ones inevitably leads to a significant decline in overall quality and performance. In Russia, even 2 years ago, there was already talk about wanting to change automobile standards, essentially to revert them to the standards of the 1970s. And now they're saying that because of these strikes and the inability to fully restore everything, they will lower the requirements for fuel production.
Accordingly, lowering fuel production standards will lead to cars breaking down.
Russian refineries will produce gasoline of significantly lower quality. This gasoline will end up in the engines of Russian cars, which may not even be able to run on it because their engines are used to a certain quality standard. And now this standard is being lowered in Russia. This will clog engines and lead to a huge number of car breakdowns. So this is the reality that is now setting in Russia. And again, this is yet another confirmation that when you are technologically behind, and Russia would indeed be technologically behind, then perhaps it's not a good idea to go to war with the world.
In September, the gasoline shortage on the domestic market reached 20% of consumption. Due to supply shortages, wholesale gasoline prices have jumped by 40 to 50% since the beginning of the year.
It is obvious that Russia is already lacking capacity. Yes, there is still some capacity left, but not all of our drones, so to speak, have reached their targets yet. So this is not some distant prospect. This is the outlook for early 2026, when Russia will be hugely dependent on external fuel suppliers, I repeat, in a country that is essentially a gas station.
In order to at least somehow put out the fire on the fuel market, the authorities imposed a complete ban on the export of gasoline from Russia. They relaxed environmental requirements for refineries, quadrupled fuel purchases from Belarus, and also eliminated import duties to start importing from China.
In September, compared to August 2025, Belarus increased its fuel supplies fourfold. So they used to supply a little, but now we understand that Belarus plays a huge role. Because Belarus, yes, while it may be the most modern from the perspective of the former USSR, these are not highly active processing plants in Mozyr and Novopolotsk. But still, their capacity is not enough to cover Russia's needs. And next is China. But neither Belarus nor China will supply, let's say, at the prices that Russia wants.
Russia could even end up depending on fuel imports for up to 60% by the end of the year.
In addition to Belarus and China, fuel supplies to Russia will also come from Azerbaijan. And just like with Belarus and China, Azerbaijan won't do it cheaply either. There will be a markup seeing how dependent Russia is on Azerbaijan right now. Azerbaijan will, of course, try to take advantage of this. So there will be certain higher prices here. But Russia has no other option. That is, Russia is indeed becoming more and more dependent now on external suppliers.
Since the beginning of August, UAVs have struck dozens of major oil refineries in Russia, leading to the deepest fuel crisis in the country's history. And the further it goes, the worse the situation becomes.
Russia has killed 2 more Ukrainian children. They were tortured in captivity. These are Daniil Dakov and Pavel Grimak from temporarily occupied Melitopol. They were only 16 years old. The occupiers accused the teenagers of terrorism and arrested them in 2023. And already in May 2024, the Russian occupation authorities informed the parents of the boys' deaths. Of course, they tried to hide the real cause of death.
The Russians told Daniil and Pavel's parents that the boys died while carrying out so-called partisan work. They said the boys were killed by an improvised explosive device. But in reality, Daniil and Pavel were tortured to death. And this actually happened back in April 2024. The occupiers suggested that Daniil and Pavel's parents take DNA tests to identify the remains. But the children's bodies were never returned. Remains were found, but there was only enough for one DNA test, so there were no more remains. That sounds very strange. At this point, there has still been no burial here, because the bodies have not been handed over to the parents.
Yet another painful reminder that Russia is a country of rot, and it must be punished. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon.